We are currently going through one of the biggest transformations in financial history, the Fintech revolution. And it's going to transform banking as we know it. The bankers of the future will be very different from the bankers today.
One of the reasons why companies are investing so heavily is because there's big demand from consumers for fintech services.
Well, I think if you think about the under 30 generation, the millennial generation, Gen Tech as I call them, they grew up with a screen in front of them. And so they think about everyday processes like payments differently than you and I do. To serve these markets, reimagine how money can be managed and moved, because there's going to be more change in the next 5 years in financial services than happened in the past 30.
What will the infrastructure and ecosystem for fintech be like in Charlotte 5 years from now?
Whether banks are ready or not to withstand the onslaught, the disruption from fintech. I mean, that's going to be a big, broad question for the next 5, 10, maybe 20 years. How ready are they?
The line between science fiction and true science is often thin and sometimes difficult to define. The dreams of just a few years ago are today's commonplace events. It is this boundary that was the lifelong fascination of Isaac Asimov.
More than a half a century before Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk felt compelled to warn the world of artificial intelligence back in 1942, before the term was even coined, the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov wrote The 3 Laws of Robotics, a moral code to keep our machines in check. And the 3 laws of robotics are:
Law number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm.
Number 2, a robot must obey orders given by qualified personnel unless those orders violate rule number 1. In other words, a robot can't be ordered to kill a human being.
And the third, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first and the second law.
Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. Does the world need to agree on 3 laws of robotics for today's challenge?
I do think there is a playing field that has to be level. We have to agree on terminology, we have to agree on frameworks and approaches for governance, and I think we have to agree on the principles by which we will judge success.
Clap. No.
Oh, we're supposed to go off it. Not the authorized time yet.
Sorry, I should have coordinated this better. So, yeah, see? That's what happens when you plan yesterday for this. So everybody knows that iRobot was a screenplay written in 2004 for Will Smith. But a little known fact is that Isaac Asimov actually did something similar to it in 1950. And it really got me thinking, how do those 3 laws of robotics, which were revolutionary at the time, apply to today's world of fintech, the future of fintech? So I did a little playing around a while back, starting to think about how that might look, how it might work. So the first thing that I started crafting and looking at was, there we go. So the first spot I landed on was the 3 laws of banking, right? A fintech may not injure a bank or through inaction allow a bank to come to harm. And then 2, a fintech must obey the orders given it by banks, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And then 3, a fintech must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. So the challenge here is the same challenge if you read Isaac Asimov's book that went through that entire series. And the crux of it is when one entity, in his case humans, are crafting the law for another sentient being, the robots, well, it doesn't always work out. And you can think of the scenario here in red, right, is the person who's having the law written against them. You can think of the scenario of a fintech company that has a product that engages a bank, and the bank says, you need to go through our 18-month vendor process. So now the fintech is always thinking on rule 3. I must protect my own existence, right? But it's in contradiction with the first and second laws. So now the bank is the one who's in charge, and the fintech is not able to protect itself. So that is the crux of why his entire series of novels failed. So then I said, all right, let's flip it around. How about if the 3 laws of fintech, a logical progression? A bank may not injure a fintech or through an action allow a fintech to come to harm. A bank must obey the orders given to it by fintechs, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And then finally, a bank must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. So now you start thinking about a scenario, still the same problem. The scenario in this case, though, is the fintech company wants to have the bank bring its product directly to their consumers, but it's sitting and hosted on a server under their desk at their job, and it has a bunch of vulnerabilities and static code scanning issues, right? So now that third law is in contradiction with the others. So it again doesn't work. And this is not only the conflict that exists in Asimov's books, it's also the conflict that every major city vying for fintech domination around the world is falling prey to. They are trying to write the rules on whoever has the critical mass in their area. And whoever it is either red or blue. So we started thinking here, how is Carolina different? How is Carolina approaching this different than anyone else? And that, my friends, I'll just point this time, brought us to the 3 laws of Carolina fintech. A bank and fintech must protect their respective reputations and solvency in all interactions. A bank and fintech must strive to partner in good faith. And finally, the third law, together, a bank must strive to partner versus build or buy, and a fintech must strive to leverage scalability and security as long as such actions do not conflict with the first and second law. So now you have a completely different paradigm. And you know why that's possible? Because neither the bank themselves or the fintech themselves wrote the rules. Carolina is a place. It is a region. And in that region, we house both fintechs and banks. So we were able to craft this rule. And this sits at the crux of our belief system. And then there's one final rule, the 0th law. If you read the book, or I don't think they did it in the Will Smith movie, but you'll remember that this supersedes all laws. And we believe in this one too. A bank or fintech may not harm humanity or through an action allow humanity to come to harm. So now we have our rule set, and that is Carolina fintech. And the only thing that remains is we need an entity, a body to then house these rules. It has to be input somewhere. And that is where the Carolina FinTech Hub comes into play. And the only question that remains is, why do we exist? Carolina FinTech Hub is something we're all very, very excited about. When you look at the battle for fintech that's happening globally right now, we're on the front end of that, and it's a very exciting time when there are organizations, pockets of incredible innovation that are occurring all around us, and out of this organic flow of a journey over the last couple years, a joint venture, I like to call it a joint nonprofit venture of a dozen companies, comes together to not reinvent wheels, but to wrap around and support initiatives that are in place, find gaps and fill those gaps, and really create what is now defined as this regional hub play that we're making. We've launched our hackathon that's going to be our annual program region-wide across all the universities in South Carolina. This is going to build that talent pipeline to not just connect to the incumbent organizations that we represent, but also connect into where the capital is being deployed for new ideas and innovation. We launched a digital community. If you haven't gone to it or seen it, carolinafintechhub.org. We've already had the CFPB's Chief Innovation Officer come down, hold the first ever Project Catalyst office hours in Charlotte. We're launching a Raleigh chapter, so we're going to spread across the entire region. We're going to create a talent pipeline, we're going to create a capital pipeline, and we're going to create an environment in our area where, in the definition of fintech, We're not looking for just the disruption in the financial services industry. We're looking to find how we can connect with the incumbents and the startups, the enhancement of financial technology on those components. So we're also going to create unique client engagements, unique client opportunities. I've been sitting with a new class of city council elected folks that are ramping up an orientation on one. The thing that struck me, we've got a majority of people newly elected that are millennials, under 40, that are representing our city here. And we're partnering in Raleigh and across the state with other people who are looking at this new opportunity with fintech. You probably couldn't go to a majority of cities across the US and get a definition of what fintech is. This morning in our orientation, the topic came up 3 times, fintech, and what it could mean, not just globally, but for our region here. You should walk away from here being very optimistic about where we are going to go from a regional perspective.
Well, I think the ability to clearly articulate available capital will be very important. It's one of the reasons I love the hub. A startup can have a great idea, can have great people, but it also needs money to grow. So I think that's very important. We should judge our success by being known when it's Austin and Silicon Valley and Charlotte. Eventually, Charlotte, Austin, and the Silicon Valley. Charlotte's going to be great at this, though. We aim to hit above our weight, and usually when we do that, we make it. I really appreciate your leadership on fintech. You are pioneering. We're happy and love supporting the work, but it's no different than a Hugh McCall or an Ed Crutchfield. It's just virtual as opposed to physical.
The group of us who have all been at it for multiple years, my hope is they will view the group of us 15 and 20 years from now as the Hugh McCalls and Ed Crutchfields for the next generation of building on the shoulders of those folks.
The mission is to create what people thought about 30 years ago and 50 years ago for Charlotte, to create the next 50 years out of an understanding and a deep advocacy for the best of tech.
We run into people from Charlotte. They're always the nicest people, and they always have this kind of really positive attitude about the city. It was a really supportive business culture, this really can-do attitude about how business got done in the city. So when I think of Charlotte, I think of, number one, the weather. Number two, the cost of living, quality of life. All those things combined lead to, it's a competitive environment to attracting talent in the market. This is going to be a growing market for the talent that we need. You have a workforce that's far more mobile than it ever has been. For the first time, really, a workforce can choose to work where they want to work. And the fact that the workforce, talented, technical people are choosing to move to the Charlotte market to work, I think says a lot.
I'm very proud to be a part of the Carolina Fintech Hub. One of our values is really making sure that our communities are successful and those that we serve. If there's a great fintech company in the Carolinas, I think if we can see them grow here, that's a great bonus. I think banks have been very successful when they work together. Banking isn't really thought of as a digital business, but I think we're out to change that. And I think if you actually look at what most banks do, there's a lot of technology investment, a lot of technology behind what we do. You can't say bank and not have technology involved.
That's right. So you represent 77, is it?
77 commercial banks doing business in the state. We represent everyone from Bank of America at the top end to a very small savings bank on the East Coast with 3 employees. That's quite a diverse membership. I would say 95% of our members are community banks. The challenge that a community bank has is the lack of scale, the high overhead, the fixed cost of being a bank that's regulatory, it's operational, it's human resources, a whole host of things. And so what can we do as an association to help 95% of those banks possibly work together on shared services, back office operations where they can reduce the overhead or bring efficiencies? And so when I learned about the Fintech Hub and the things that the large banks are innovating, we need to bring the smaller banks, the community banks, to the table to learn about these things and see how they might be able to collaborate.
What's impressive is the energy that's around this organization, the different constituents that are involved. Not only do we have a great group of sponsors, but outside just the sponsors that are bringing money to the table, which we need for this organization to run, we equally need people's talents and people's time. And there are many organizations that are involved lending their talent. And there are people working during the day, there are people working at night, and there's people working during the weekend. So what's amazing to me is the energy and the amount of time that people are willing to commit to this without earning any money.
You went on a weekend and actually experienced the hackathon at UNCC a couple weeks ago.
There were a group of, I think 31, 35 students who formed 8 teams, and these folks stayed up 28 hours straight developing solutions to some financial problems. Beyond just those teams, there were at least that many people in the background who came together to put that on. It just was amazing, and you show up there and you see all these people, and again, you see the passion and you see the learning. It's just one of the ingredients of why I think the Carolina Fintech Hub is so important, and why I think it's going to pay dividends to the community. It's going to create this community within the Carolinas where technologists and entrepreneurs can connect with each other, where fintech companies can connect with other young fintech companies, but also connect with the larger companies like Ally. And really, that's the purpose and that's the mission.
Enter at your own risk.
Hells yeah, I'm gonna mosh tonight. In the last 2.5 decades, the mosh pit has evolved.
I don't know, maybe it's been around forever and we're just now calling it the mosh pit, like in the tribal days where they'd like dance around the fire.
For veteran moshers, there's a set of unspoken rules that governs pit behavior.
So mosh pit etiquette.
That's the walk-up song.
In the last 2.5 decades, the mosh pit has evolved.
I don't know, maybe it's been around forever and we're just now calling it the mosh pit, like in the tribal days where they'd like dance around the fire.
For veteran moshers, there's a set of unspoken rules that governs pit behavior.
So mosh pit etiquette.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Carolina Fintech Hub podcast, live edition. We are here at Fintech Generations, and it's everybody's favorite segment, the Fintech Mosh Pit. With us is some usual and some new cast of characters. We have Alex O'Rourke from Womble. We have Chris Hart from Level. We've got old man Aubrey Hawes from Oracle.
I get an old joke every time.
And we have, ladies and gentlemen, a very special guest that I tricked into joining us, the number 4 influencer on the global list of fintech who's who, whoopity-woo people in the world, Jim Marous. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it. Come on! This is live.
Hey, Jim, I'm glad I'm not the old guy this time. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You guys are the same age, aren't you?
I know, thank you.
So why don't we start off, for those of you who don't listen to the podcast, this is an actual episode that will be up. I think it's like episode 12 or 13. I lost count. But this is where we do in the Fintech Mosh Pit a little bit of a round robin. Everyone kind of has a topic. We usually are very underprepared, as we are today. So I'm going to start us off while you guys think of your questions, and we'll spend 2 or 3 minutes on each one. So my first question, obviously, since we just watched that amazing video, it was really incredibly edited by somebody who may be needing some kind of prize of some sort. I don't know.
We can get you a Finsiders t-shirt.
Yes. Well, no,
I think that's what you need.
So what do you guys think? Anyone chime in with what you think about the Carolina Fintech Hub and why you're involved? Aubrey, you always start. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, well, to me, it is just amazing what we've been able to do with pulling the whole community together. I mean, I was shocked when you guys asked me to go run the hackathons, because I was like going, you realize I've never even been to a hackathon.
It was
much
a
less
super
run
bad
one.
decision. It was
and
a
now,
terrible
but
decision.
now I'm like an expert, which is
You
fantastic.
he slept in a sleeping bag with the students like the entire time.
Yeah. So I was telling the dean when the dean came up this morning. I said, that Portal building, your benches sleep really well, and she looked at me like I had 3 heads.
Yeah, that's a weird thing to say. Chris, what do you think? What's your reason that you invest a significant amount of unpaid time into the Carolina Fintech Hub?
I think fundamentally it comes down to what you were talking about when you go through the 3 laws and the difficulty that I think people have historically had with how do you reconcile fintech and banking. I think we have a great opportunity here for all the reasons that the video kind of outlined, to be able to bring together great talent that we have at the banks and at the fintech companies that are developing here. And I think this is the community where that can really come together much better than it can in some of the historical places that you would think of as being, where fintech innovation would happen.
Alex, you are our regulatory sandbox, public-private partnership. Your cohort over there, your colleague Rick Scott, obviously, and you tag team that now with Mark. Why are you in this?
So I came from DC about a year ago, and a lot of people said, "Why are you moving to Charlotte? Like, what's in Charlotte?" And I think to me it was really important to be
Not
part
DC
of,
is the answer to that.
Barbecue.
part of it. But people would say, like, "What are you going to do there? What is because I was doing a lot of AI
NASCAR.
and a lot of fintech, and it was so important to me to see. Not only was there a scene here, but there were a lot of people who were really donating probably tens of thousands of dollars every month of time, getting energy into this and making it exciting and making it really putting us on the map, right? I've traveled a lot this last year, and everywhere I go, people will say, "I saw the hub on LinkedIn. I saw what y'all were doing." And people had never thought about Charlotte. A lot of the people I knew in sort of that context, and now we're on the map, and it's really the hub doing it. And that, to me, being part of it, my husband calls it my student organization, but it's my absolute favorite extracurricular.
One follow-up question for you, and this is in all seriousness. We kind of somewhat joke about it, but it's not funny, where we have actively been trying to recruit fintech women to join us that are leaders in the space. And that our goal is to bring them into the banking environments. And we have a hard enough time bringing them into just this organization and identifying them. And you ultimately become the one female fintech expert that we can actually come to and bring in. How do you feel about that, and why do you think that is?
I think some of it is the pipeline, right? I think a lot of women who are in my position have a lot of choices and have a lot of opportunities to work in other industries. I think part of it is really seeing people who look like you. I mean, I've been approached by several women in this room today to say, "I want to be more involved. Let's have lunch. Let's have coffee. Let's really," because I think I work a lot in San Francisco, and my network there is, frankly, a lot of women, right? It's mostly women. But I think it's because we all know each other, we all refer each other work, we all end up sort of working together. Let's build that in Charlotte. I think we can absolutely do that. We're there, the presence is here. We just need to make sure that we network better, and we're starting to do that, but I hope that this can be a catalyst today.
Jim, you travel all around the world. Why is Carolina Fintech Hub the best thing you've ever seen?
No bias at all. I think one difference that I've seen is the growth, and the energy level. I called somebody at lunch break and said, it's amazing to see how quickly this is gelling, and almost mirroring what's happening in fintech all overall. Unless you have scale, it's hard to have an impact. This is scale. I mean, this is a big deal. And with regards to where else I go, there are very few organizations that have more than 200-300 people in the organization around fintech. So you have that, and I think it's important because without scale, without the support of people like Kathy and the people of all the other organizations, you don't have a voice. You're talking in a soundproof room among yourselves, which can be helpful, but it doesn't get out. And this will only grow bigger. And I think that's what's key, because when you liken it to fintech overall, if you can get scale, and if you can get the funding and support of the larger organizations, you're going to make a difference. And I mentioned it in the Oracle lunch that one of the other differences here is that, just like in Europe, you have a number of different financial institutions working together and sharing ideas and thoughts without fear that, they'll be stolen. That's not happens in the US very often. Everybody's very parochial and thinks, oh my gosh, if I give you my ideas, you're going to take them and use them elsewhere. The reality is, I can give you all the ingredients of a cake. You can't make the cake I can make. So you'll make it your own way, maybe with the same ingredients, but it won't come out the same. And I think, we see how that's done. We see how even the most basic products, like remote deposit capture, that basic product can have a lot of different flavors to it. This kind of environment allows that to happen. And I think it's funny that Kathy, I saw her last week in Austin as well. And the similarities between Austin and Charlotte right now are very strong in many ways. Not only the size of the communities, but the great barbecue, the great people, the great beer, and the great fintech. And I think what's neat is these are the new fintech hubs. This is, I believe, more important than Silicon Valley, than New York, than London, because this has really got an energy that's the new generation, as opposed to the previous generation, which now almost looks staid. As I brought up this morning, the phone almost seems to be clumsy and now almost cumbersome, going, what's next? I'm ready for the next thing. This is the kind of thing it is.
Jim, it's funny, as you said the phone, I recalled you handing me your business card. Did anyone get Jim's business card here? Yeah, well, you probably didn't because you can only carry 4
How about
at a
last
time.
night? That had to be
because
the
they're
most
about this
important
thick. They're debit cards. I think they're preloaded with like $10 gift card to like Starbucks or something. That is impressive. But my critique of this is the fintech man of the future. One of my personal heroes. He should be handing out smartphones with a mobile wallet with his number on it. That is the only thing that I would accept. I already have one. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you to ask the next question, but I am going to take a quick second to just mention to the group on Jim's point, which is we've come a long way with the Fintech Hub, and we've made a lot of strides in the last year, even half year. But it's important for us to look back at one person particularly who really put it on his shoulders and made a lot of this possible. And he's the same guy who, with Aubrey and Rami in the group, is putting on this great event. So let's give a big hand for Dan Roselli, ladies and gentlemen. He's been at it a long time. So hopefully that sucking up bought you enough time to think of your question, Chris.
Absolutely. No. So, I think there's been a lot of news for a long time, but in particular in the last week or two around digital transformation in banks. American Banker announced their Digital Banker of the Year last week. Tim Spence, Fifth Third, really talking about the amazing work that's been going on at Fifth Third. And I think it really highlights the fact that digital transformation and digital enablement isn't just the playground for the biggest banks in the country. Everybody plays a role in that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that, both from banks and from fintechs. I think the question that I would pose is, what does a world look like for a bank that doesn't start to adopt that? So I think what we're starting to see is the tide is quickly turning, right? For a long time, a lot of banks have said, well, we can hang back, we'll see, what the future holds. Is the tide turning? And if people don't start to react, what does the world look like for a bank that doesn't start to transform?
Sears, Kmart. I mean, I think that's what's going to happen. I think there are going to be people that get left far behind, because I think the comment of I want to be a fast follower worked 30 years ago, right? That says I can go back and I'm going to follow. I want to let these guys go figure it out, and we'll catch up. And you almost could say a little bit Apple's going to be interesting to see how they do that, because they've been really quick following.
So hold on a second, I disagree with you. This is where the mosh pit comes in. Fast following is not always a bad thing. I agree in that case. But when you look at the EU's PSD2 and GDPR, they're going to bash their face through a brick wall. And they're going to get to a better point for all of us, but they're going to come out bloodier on the other side, where we, in this Carolina Fintech Hub, could fast follow, copy the things that are good, avoid the things that are bad, and be right behind them, and maybe be better off for it, Jim.
But it's a different definition of fast and a different definition of follow, okay? We've had, I was mentioning Aubrey earlier, we've had for 7 years in research on onboarding. 50% of institutions have an onboarding process. 23% say they're going to have it in a year. The next year, 52% say they have it, 22% say they're going to have it in a year. Next year, 53%, 23%. Now it's back down to 50%, 22%. Guys, following is only happens if you catch up. Yeah. And the challenge right now is, and it was interesting, you showed Peter Gwaltney, and I spoke to his organization last year, and I said, guys, we are moving from a too big to fail mentality to a too small to succeed. The vendors who supply services to smaller financial institutions are farther behind than the banks are in many cases. You have to go out there and have the initiatives to do things differently than you've ever done before, or else you will be no longer in existence. Now, it may be a slow death, but the reality is, look where millennials are opening their accounts right now. Millennials want to open their accounts with a community organization, but look at where they're opening. They're opening up to 5 big banks. Why? Because at the end of the day, you're making a decision based on their digital capabilities, and the place where they see the digital capabilities is with the big banks. That's not a good scenario, but it can be changed.
I don't mean to.
But what I would say is, look at this. If you say, I'm going to wait for PSD2 to come across, let them get all figured out, and then I'm going to start to open up, that is way too late. So I think the point is, you've got to experiment. You've got to start to play around with opening up. Even though we may not have the standard, let's look at what they're doing. I think the fast follow, if you want it to succeed, it has to be, I'm experimenting, but just not quite at the same rate.
And to build on that, Aubrey, I think the other key is that you're not saying that you have to go fast on everything, right? There are things that it may make sense to hold back on, but pick something where you can say, hey, maybe there's a way to move the needle on this. I'm gonna be more aggressive in this one particular area. I'm gonna go figure out a way to monetize KYC. I'm gonna go figure out a way to monetize digital identities. And yeah, I'll hold back on some other digital transformation activities. I don't necessarily have to go all in on everything, but saying, hey, where am I uniquely qualified to be able to go make a difference?
But I feel like we're not going to have a choice soon, right? So it used to be fintechs were going to disrupt banks. Then fintechs were going to partner with banks. Now we're seeing a lot of fintechs saying, I'll be the bank, right? Doesn't look that hard. It is, by the way, but talk to me if you're going to do that.
However, GBS established a brand new digital bank in India in 9 months.
Exactly.
So it doesn't have to be hard.
We'll talk about this in a second, but the OCC just said we want banks to do small dollar lending. You know who's going to love that? Fintechs who want to be banks, and fintechs who, frankly, can't.
Well, honestly,
who's not going to love that?
But no, I think won't banks like that too? Because honestly,
they will,
banks, if banks can say, I'm going to go find a fintech who can build the experience for me to be able to do this kind of small dollar lending thing.
But that's the question. How many banks are actually saying that? I know a lot of the Carolina Fintech Hub banks are, but when I was traveling around with my last company and talking to a lot of them, they were just kind of like, we'll hold our breath and kind of see how this all shakes out. And that is not a strategy.
Well, it's a culture shift because we talk a great game. We talk about customer experience, but we measure how fast we can answer a problem call on the phone. That's not how people judge experience anymore. It's on the digital platform. If you do not move forward, if a financial institution continues to go to events and just listen to what's supposed to be done and talks a good game, you will be caught now. Now, I can't tell you exactly when it's going to be, but it's like continuing to build branches unless you're one of the big banks. The reality is you can't live in a bank branch world where the cost of operations on distribution alone is 8 times that of a fintech. You've got to find an alternative. Yes. And some banks now, Citibank building their brand new digital platform. There's at least 3 other banks I'm familiar with. They're going to have a separate digital entity most likely. That's going to give you scale and the fintech mentality that Movin wasn't able to achieve and a lot of the traditional financial institutions aren't able to achieve. The key is going to be which one of the small organizations are going to say, there's no holding me back. Because I'll tell you right now, of the top 3 banks, one of them spoke overseas about 9 months ago and said, we're no longer waiting for the government to approve things. We're waiting for us to apologize for doing things.
That's the Lime Bike model for those of you here in Charlotte.
What do you think about that,
No, but the mentality is that they know already how the government's going to react to different things they do, and they know their alignment, and it's not going to be a problem. But the challenge is to put things out there and to ask for people to have input in them is not the best way to do it.
I completely agree. It's a talent. Go ahead.
Okay, so
this is why women don't join us, because all the men jump over top. And
no, they do not jump over me.
Good point.
So I think people are misunderstanding the role of regulators in this new economy, right? So we've seen, the CFPB went out there and really was forward-leaning. What's happened, right? It's reining all the way back, right? We see, to sort of put a plug in for the hub also, Calvin, who's here today from the Fed, this is the Fed's first ever fintech office hours, right? Here in Charlotte. Why are they doing that? Why would he fly here from DC to meet with y'all? The reason he's doing that is because he wants to hear where the problems are. He wants to see where the pain points are, and he wants to engage. And I could tell you, I think some of us say, well, if regulators would just get out of the way, we would innovate. I can tell you right now that frequently what we blame on regulation is really risk masked, right? We're saying, oh, my regulator will hate it. And really, it's my investor will hate it. My risk profile will hate it, right? So I
can't explain it properly to them in a way
I have the right talent that gets it. I think it's a talent management, because I think that's what you're going to see. These digital challengers that are coming out of these banks is all about talent. And how do you actually get talent that thinks about running things at a lower cost? And the view is absolutely, let me not get permission, but let me go back and manage.
So this is why we don't. This is the first time we've ever done the FinTech Mosh Pit on a timeline. We usually just plan for 10 minutes and then we go like 45. So we're getting the hook here. So why don't we have one last word from the panelists here? We'll end with Jim because we'll start on the oldest side of the dais here. Aubrey, why don't you go first?
I'm good with that.
What I want to do in my time is just say thank you to everyone for coming out today. Thank you for all the sponsors that I've tried to track down to go make this work. I think it's a great turnout. Really glad to see you here. Hope to see you at all the rest of the Finsider events, the rest of the hackathons we do, as well as be right back here next year.
So those of you who know me know that I only talk about three things: regulation, my dog, and diversity, right? So on the third one, this is what we look like, right? I think that we, please be part of the conversation. We're a super open organization. Again, I mean, you're happy to work for free, we'll have you. But please make this conversation about more than just these people up here. We need to get more women, more people of color, more people of different socioeconomic backgrounds involved in the hub and involved in FinTech in Charlotte. Please approach us. We'll make it work for you.
Chris?
So what I would say is the vast majority of people who are in this room, the organization that you work for is probably involved with the Carolina FinTech Hub somehow. So if you haven't been engaged in CFH so far, there's lots of opportunities for you to be able to do that. So please, look internally to get engaged. If you can't find the right resources to get engaged internally, come talk to any of us. We'd love to have you. There's a lot of work left to do.
Jim, the big close.
Finally, innovation should no longer be about cutting costs. It should be customer experience engagement. And you look at anything from mobile banking to ATMs, everything else, while we called it to make the customer experience better, it was all about cost reduction. Until we start looking at this from a customer enhancement perspective, we're going to continue to make the same errors about decisions we make and why we make them.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you so much. My only parting words are, remember the 3 laws of Carolina FinTech and join us. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the Carolina FinTech Hub podcast, live FinTech Mosh Pit edition. Thank you very much and have a great rest of the conference.